Welcome to Drawing Materials 101, where I am going to share all of the drawing materials, graphites, charcoals, erasers, papers, how I sharpen my charcoals and my graphites to keep them at a razor point edge without breaking constantly, and more. We're going to jump right into drawing tools with graphite and charcoal first up, with as well some Conté and Pastel. Okay, my favorite pencils have to be the Tombow brand. They are, as you can tell, quite loved. I do have a full set, but I just grabbed a couple of small ones here. A few examples here. You can see I've used this 2B all the way to a tiny, almost 1-inch nubbin. With these, I do sharpen them just with a regular pencil sharpener, and they come in different hardnesses, okay? So they'll have from H's all the way to an HB, and then it'll switch to 2B, 4B, 6B. So you have 2H, 4H, 6H. That is the hardness and the softness. So an H graphite pencil will have a harder approach. So you will have to lay more layers. It won't go on as smoothly, whereas a B will go on much smoother. It will get much darker, and you have to have a little bit of a lighter hand with those. I love the Tombow brand because they feel the most, for lack of a better word, buttery or juicy. They are very, again, buttery and juicy. They just lay down the charcoal really, really nicely. I do have some of this General Pencils Kimberly. You can tell it is not my preference. This is a 2H, and I've only used it very slightly. They work very, very well. They're easy to acquire. They're just not quite as nice to me as the Tombows. With graphite, something that can start to happen as you build more layers is the graphite can build up and now start to become shiny and reflective. So instead of a shadow appearing or a dark passage appearing very, very dark, it now appears lighter because you have put so many layers down and the graphite is now becoming shiny. This can be an effect that people really, really like, or something that they really, really don't like. So in that case, if you really want to take something much, much darker and not get that shine effect, it might be time to turn to charcoal. Charcoal comes in all kinds of forms. Let's talk about the loosest to then the most compressed. The loosest form of charcoal that I am aware that you can purchase is a compressed charcoal, or a powdered charcoal. This is by Generals. I have had this for probably 10 years, and I have only used about this much, and I've used it quite a bit. So it lasts quite long, especially if you pour the excess back into the jar. I actually use this charcoal to create this drawing as a part of the Drawing Conclusion series out now on my Patreon, which talks about everything drawing related, everything that I have learned about drawing in my time studying with the masters. But I used a powdered charcoal scrub on this piece of paper to then work into for that drawing. Highly recommend having some powdered charcoal. The next type of charcoal that is very, very helpful to have would be vine or willow charcoal. I like any brand. I honestly don't really notice a difference. It is very, very loose. It allows for making quick marks, especially at the beginning of a drawing, that won't scratch the paper, won't leave a very, very dark mark. You can wipe it away. It will leave sort of a ghost image. If you go very, very hard, it can be impossible to erase, but otherwise it's a great option for those initial placement marks for quick 2-minute sketches. You do want to avoid making anything extremely precious with just loose vine charcoal, because if you blow on it and you haven't carefully made sure that it is massaged into the paper, or if you've done an entire drawing just with vine charcoal, blowing on it or moving it and shifting it will act almost like an Etch-a-Sketch or sand. It will blow away and it will all shift. So these are great things for learning, for doing the initial lay-ins, but not for doing an entire drawing. If you're going to be doing an entire drawing, you're going to want to move to a more compressed charcoal, which is where we then get into charcoal pencils. Okay. Let's start with some of my favorites. My actual #1 favorites. I really love General's charcoal pencils, and I sharpen them in a very specific way, which I'm going to show you in a second part to this video, where we also get into papers and erasers and all of that good stuff. So I'll show you how I do this, but I love to get this long point on the charcoal and get these pencils in several thicknesses as well. They go from extra soft to hard. They might have extra hard, I'm not sure. Why does that matter? Well, a hard charcoal pencil will lay the charcoal down a little bit more reservedly than soft or extra soft. You barely have to touch the paper with the soft or extra soft to get a very nice, dark, rich, luscious mark or tone. So at the beginning of your drawing, you might go from fine charcoal, very non-committal, to a hard charcoal pencil, a little bit more committed, but still laying down a nice light mark. You can use it very lightly and not be scratching the paper until you're totally ready to commit to the placement and to putting real detail or dark marks into the paper, and then you can move to a softer pencil, or more hardly, more pressed in application of a hard charcoal pencil. So these are my favorite charcoal pencils. But we're not just limited to charcoal and graphite when it comes to drawing. There's also an entire world of pastel and Conté, and they have a little bit of a different feel to them than charcoal. So charcoal can be erased. Even when using all the way up to an extra soft, you can use an eraser to erase the charcoal. When you start getting into pastel and Conté crayons or Conté pencils, which I'm going to show you in just a second, they are not as easily erased. They're a little bit more committed, but they're also a little bit more pigmented, meaning they come in many, many colors, but they also have a little bit of a heavier punch. They're a little creamier. They can go a little bit more intense. So let me show you some of my favorites. Let's start with the pastels. These are a Faber-Castell Pit Pastel. I have them in this nice sort of skin color. I'm not sure the exact color here on these, but it's sort of a sepia tone. These do come in many colors. They're a little bit harder than the Conté crayon I'm going to show you next. So they lay the pastel down very similar to the charcoal feel. It's not quite as creamy as the Conté, but it makes a very, very nice mark, and it allows you to start to introduce some color into these drawings, to do maybe a 3-color portrait with white and charcoal black, or you could get these in dark brown or this red. They come in, as I said, a lot of different colors. So I'm a big fan of these Faber-Castell Pit Pastels. Again, I also sharpen them in a very specific way. These are sharpened very nicely in order to get those razor sharp points, but then also allow you to get a tone with this longer edge. Again, I'm going to show you that in the second part to this video. All right, now to Conté pencils. I have these in 4 different colors, all from Conté à Paris. I think that's how you say it. I love to work in multiple colors with the drawings. I just think it makes a really exciting look, very much Leonardo da Vinci-esque, having sort of this warmth into the shadow areas if it's a portrait to mimic that blood, the white to be able to create really beautiful and specific, almost painterly highlights. So with these Contés, I have them in black, I have them in a dark brown called sepia, I have them in sanguine, this sort of darker, redder color, and then white. And I sharpen them. Sometimes I'll leave them as they're sharpened straight out of the box, like this bad boy, if you can see him, or I will sharpen them in my typical fashion to get a longer point. But these, again, are not easy to erase, so you want to use them when you are ready to fully commit, but they lay down a really creamy mark and allow for a really exciting, colorful effect to your drawings. The Contés also come, you can tell how much I have loved some of these. Again, we have another tiny little guy. These Contés also come in stick form, of which I have several. Charcoal also comes in sticks, so let me show you this. This would be a charcoal stick. So it will give you a different application. You can lay it on its side and get a really long stroke application, a very big toned area. But then here is a Conté in orange, Conté stick. Here's a Conté au Paris stick as well. These just allow you to get a little bit more of a broad stroke, so to speak. So if I was going to be doing a drawing and I wanted just a ghost in of red to work into on top, this would be a really great option, much better than going in with a pencil, which will take for a very long time, probably snap the pencil. You can lay this on its side, massage it into the paper, and get a really nice tone. I'm also a big fan of these. Finally, how do we store all of this once we've got it so that it is staying in good condition? How do we preserve our materials? Now we have all these little tiny pieces and parts that can crack. That's where a very simple, easy fishing tackle box is key. Let me show you mine. This is my tackle box, which I acquired for my drawing materials. I just used the individual compartments for different pieces and parts. It will not stay clean. If you have charcoal and Conté mixing together, you just need to be prepared that there is going to be a lot of charcoal and Conté flying around. So I have, in recent drawings, I have really mixed up some of these things, but I roughly have my Contés here. I have my erasers here. I've learned a very valuable lesson about how to store erasers. I will share that in the next video. I have some markers and willow charcoal, vine charcoal here, and then I have been arranging different colors. Some things have gotten out of control, and somehow we have watercolor pencils in here now. So this is a wonderful way of storing these, and if you want to have, if you're going to be flying or if you're going to be driving and you're worried about them all rattling around and then cracking and then therefore breaking off every single time you sharpen them, you could get pieces of foam and cut them to size for each compartment, or many paper towels, something soft to cushion them so that they won't be shifting and moving a lot in transportation. In our next video, we're going to get into how I sharpen these pencils so that they are swords, wonderfully ready for use at the easel for whatever subject matter I will be drawing. We're going to talk about papers, my favorites, and the different colors of them and how you can use them, erasers, and wrap up this Drawing Materials 101 with all of that fun stuff. I will see you there shortly.